Founders need to raise money to fund their startup, but most founders find themselves in what feels like an endless loop of building a pitch deck, contacting investors, getting rejected, then refining their pitch and repeating the cycle all over again. Many founders spend lots of time, money, and effort trying to raise funds, but just don't have a clear view of why they continue to fail. I'm Sam Wong, and I'm a Silicon Valley angel investor, as well as a startup coach and fractional founder. I've done 5 startups with 3 exits. I play a dual role as an investor operator in the startup space. Fundraising pitches fail for 2 reasons: weak storytelling and poor de-risking. Every startup fundraising pitch needs to tell an engaging story about a de-risked venture. This video is a replay of a webinar that shows how to build a startup pitch that captivates, validates, and motivates. Let's dive in. So thanks for everybody's time. I appreciate your investment and your time. It's very, very valuable, and hopefully we find this useful for you guys. The topic today is from rejected to funded, startup pitch deck secrets. And we're going to talk about common founder errors that delay, derail, and destroy your path to startup capital. Fundraising is very, very hard. And what we're trying to do is help you guys with a systematic process for how to be able to make it easier. I'm a multi-exited founder. I serve now as a startup advisor and angel investor. The companies I've worked with have generated over 270 million. It's probably getting close to about 300 million now in exits and fundraising rounds. I'm a member of Band of Angels. It's the oldest angel investment group in the USA. I'm also an advisor with Berkeley Skydeck, Alchemist Accelerator. I've been a judge over at Pitchforce. Uh, she's 20 times, okay? And I've also been judges at various other pitch events as well. So I've probably been a pitch judge 3, 4, 5 dozen times. I don't even know, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about the fundraising landscape and what it's really about, okay? We're going to talk also about the fact that the odds of raising funds, unfortunately, are very, very low. Okay, and if you look at the high-level overview of what happens in the fundraising process, oftentimes companies will spend over 20 hours building a pitch deck. Okay, I find it rare that companies build a quality pitch deck in under 20 hours. But the amount of time the average investor spends reviewing the deck, especially if it's a reading deck, a send ahead that you put on an email attachment, is under 3 minutes. Okay, that's a statistic from DocSend, which is a a way that a lot of founders distribute their pitch decks. Okay, so DocSend actually analyzes on a slide-by-slide basis and an overall presentation basis how long people spend, and on average, it's about 3 minutes. Okay, so if you look at the overall statistics, the amount of startups that actually receive funding is somewhere less than 5% for all the pitch decks that are sent. We talk to a lot of startup investors, especially VCs, and there are a number of VCs that say in average they can get 400 pitch decks. Of the 400, only 10% get invited for a meeting, so that's 40. And of the 10% that get invited, only 10% of those who get invited for a meeting, only 10% of those start due diligence. But of the companies that start due diligence, only 25% actually get a check. So if you do the math on that, it's about 1 in 400, or about a quarter of a point, a quarter of 1%. It's very, very challenging to be able to get startup funding. And as a member now, an active member of Band of Angels, we see a very, very similar metric and statistic. Lots of companies apply and want to get funding, but they just don't pass muster for various reasons. Okay. So if you look at the problem, why do most founders fail to raise startup funds? And the reality is the average founder doesn't focus on fundability when they're trying to fundraise. They also, most founders don't understand the investor mindset and then fail to tell a story about a de-risked startup. Okay. So we'll cover a number of these things here in the rest of the presentation, but these are 3 very, very common problems. And I can say that, number one, as a former founder, as a current investor, and as a pitch builder today, as a fractional founder for many other companies. Okay. So this is oftentimes the most common pathway that the average founder uses to be able to raise startup funds. Okay. They start off with downloading a pitch deck template. Okay, most founders have never really pitched investors before. They do a Google search on pitch deck template. There's hundreds of pitch deck templates out there, and they fill out the template. And then they start trying to contact investors as best they can, wherever they can get investor contact information, and they struggle to raise funds. So maybe some founders will try to find a specialist, either by going to a pitch deck event, and maybe one of the pitch judges will work with them, or somehow they contact a number of people out there who are pitch deck coaches. They get some feedback, incorporate that into the deck. It makes a little bit more progress, but oftentimes they still fail to raise funds. Well, the challenge can be is that the more feedback you get from various pitch coaches and pitch judges and even investors, sometimes that feedback can be conflicting. All right, and it's very, very challenging when that's the case. But you do your best to distill that into a consistent theme and continue to refine your deck. But ultimately, you spend a lot of time, but still struggle and aren't able to really close a substantive amount of funding. Okay. So this results in the average founder having a rather painful experience where they a little disorienting because sometimes the feedback gets to be conflicting, and it's a little bit difficult to know where to start sorting through the dozens and dozens of templates and hundreds of pieces of potentially conflicting advice. It can also be very misguided because I have run into a lot of people in the startup space who find a revenue opportunity by selling to founders. Okay. A lot of these, there are probably several dozen people out there who will help you refine your pitch. I find that these specialists fall into one of three categories. Number one is a graphic designer who's never run a startup, but they're just really good at making a pitch pretty. So that's the first category. The second category is pitch coaches, maybe communication coaches who maybe they've done a startup before, and they can usually are a bit more helpful. They may not be as good as the visuals, but they usually give a little bit better advice, but in many cases, that advice is unstructured and random. And these folks typically, even if they've raised funds before in the past, you have to also ask, are they an investor now? Okay. Because in some cases, people have been able to raise funds, not necessarily because they cracked the code, but there was enough momentum or the funding environment was very, very strong, like in 2020 and 2021 when, 2018 through 2020, it was much, much easier to raise funds. Okay. So just because someone has raised funds once or twice doesn't necessarily mean that they've created a systematic approach to help you raise funds. Okay. It also results oftentimes in founders just getting discouraged because it's hard. Pitching is hard. It's challenging to kind of put yourself out there and then to get, a lot of constructive criticism that about things that you're doing wrong. So oftentimes the feedback is very much verbal, which means it's transient. What I mean by that is when you're in the middle of a pitch type of event, you'll get some feedback, but it's hard to digest all of that in the live session, and it's easy for some of that feedback to be forgotten, and then some of that feedback is not always actionable. We'll talk about that more later in the presentation here. Ultimately, though, this particular situation is not unusual. It may be a little bit extreme, but this is a quote from a guy out on Quora, where he says he spent 10,000 hours working on a startup, but just could not raise startup capital because he interpreted it as that he didn't have the product, didn't have the money to build the product, and was thinking about giving up. So what this really says is that many founders are wasting a lot of time. They're losing hours they're never going to get back. What cash and time they have is being burnt up trying to keep the company alive, maybe potentially hiring a couple of service providers, even just paying the monthly software subscription on QuickBooks or whatever can just burn your cash. It also ultimately results in many startups eventually failing. Okay, that's just unfortunate is that if you lose enough time, you don't aren't able to raise cash and you continue to burn it, you're unfortunately on a road to a difficult ending. Okay. If you want to get the attention of investors, you have to think like an investor. And I'll say this: I joined Band of Angels about a month, and not a month, a year ago or so. I've been in the startup space for a good long time, and for the past 5 years or more, I've actually been helping startups to be able to raise and build their pitches and become fundable. I will say this is that being part of the band and evaluating all of the pitch decks that come through and talking to lots of investors, dozens of investors who are all trying to evaluate the likelihood of the pitching startup to be successful, to be a good investment, it has really opened my eyes into how the investors think, especially since we're all investing our own cash and not like a fund manager who invests cash raised by someone else, invested by someone else. Okay. So ultimately, we have the benefit of being a battle-tested founder who also advises invest in startups. I've done 5 startups myself, an employee of 5 startups, all of them at the VP level or above. I was a VP of engineering twice, a CTO once, a CEO once, and a VP of tech ops once. Okay. And of those 5, the first 2 shut down, the last 3 got acquired, and then I've also been an advisor for 2 other companies that startups that got acquired, um, and I've also acquired 1 company as well. So gone through the M&A process and able to see 6 startups get exited. There was a 7th one that fell through at the 11th hour. That's a story for another time, but that was also very, very revealing. It's resulted in overall getting upwards to almost 300 million in exits and funding raised. And the interesting thing is, especially as I've combined some of the things that from joining Band of Angels about a year ago, in the past 9 months, all of our clients that we work on with a fractional founder basis have raised. Okay. And in total, these 3 companies have all raised a grand total of 10 million, which is, again, a small sample size. But the reality is, we want to focus on high value, quality types of processes instead of quick hit random sound bites that sound good, but ultimately aren't really transformative. Okay. So we're gonna talk about some of our experiences through the fundraising process. We have seen common fundraising path ourselves. A while back, I served one of the startups that I was at back in 2001. I was a VP of engineering at a startup with groundbreaking technology. It was really, of the 5 startups where I was employed, this had the best tech, okay, by far. In fact, if you're a software developer, you probably know REST API integration and JSON. This was a company that had REST API integration built in 2001. So if you do any software development, REST API integration didn't take off until the late 2000s, like 2007 or so, somewhere around there. We had it 5, 7 years early. But the company still fell apart because we didn't really have a system to raise funds. We didn't build a fundable company, and we failed to raise. And the technology is sitting in the bottom drawer of a lawyer's office right now. Okay, it's really sad. But what we want to do is really help people avoid some of those situations by helping people to understand what matters. And it's not the pretty face on your pitch deck. Okay. We see 2 common mistakes that most founders make. Okay. Most mistakes roll up into one of these 2 issues from a pitch perspective. Okay. And when either of these mistakes happen, the investors immediately tune out and very quickly reject the deck. The number one is weak storytelling. Does your pitch tell a story that stands out and connects with the investors? The second is poor de-risking. Do the investors see the threats that could kill a startup being plausibly addressed? Okay, those are the 2 things you need to do in your pitch. Tell a great story about how you've de-risked your startup. Okay, so how do you do that? There's 5 specific focus areas. Your investor pitch has to be clear, concise, comprehensive, catchy, and compelling. Okay. These five elements result in telling a good story. The first four is about the quality of the story. The last one is about the quality of your de-risking. Okay. You need to be able to make sure you address all five of these goals: clear, concise, comprehensive, catchy, and compelling. Okay. Let's give some examples about how this all works. Okay. A pitch is very complex. It's very, there's lots of components to it, but we're going to take a snippet and zoom in on just one or two factors as an example. This first factor is your title slide. And most people are like, what's the big deal about a title slide? It's a bigger deal than you think. Okay. And obviously, this is not the most important thing in the pitch, but I want to be able to give you a taste of the level of detail you need to pay attention to, especially if implementing some of this advice is super easy. Okay. So your story begins on the title slide because this is where you create a first impression and connection, especially in a reading deck. And by reading deck, what we mean is an email attachment, a static PDF that you send in advance. You don't get a chance to talk through the slides. Okay. A lot of investors say, send me your pitch deck. Okay. They would be receiving the reading version of your deck. Okay. So your story begins here, and a poor title slide can really be problematic. There's another little detail about the title slide is that it is the thumbnail in a PDF. If you send an email attachment down in Gmail, or if the person saves that PDF to their hard drive, when the preview for that pitch deck, the title slide is what they see. So you get a lot of eyeballs looking at your title slide, whether you realize it or not. This is an example of a weak title slide. Blue Ribbon Sports, just do it. Okay. Well, this actually came from a real world experience. The founder was named Phil. The title of this slide, this is an example, a mock-up of what doesn't really work. Okay, so Phil Knight was the founder of Blue Ribbon Sports in 1964. Blue Ribbon Sports was the original name of Nike, the shoe company. Okay, um, so if this was the title slide, what type of impression does the investor get? Hmm, okay. Does the investor understand the industry, your value proposition and positioning? Who is the buyer? Okay, well, it looks like it has something to do with athletics, but outside of that, I don't know anything. All right. And what the investor will see when they see that title slide, Blue Ribbon Sports, just do it. That's the message I understand. But what's the industry? I don't know. Sports. What does it do in sports? I don't know. What's the unique value proposition? Just do what? What do you do? Well, I don't know. Okay. Who is the customer? I don't know. All right. You've wasted the title slide and you've already started to lose the investor's interest. Remember, clear, concise, catchy, and comprehensive. This is none of those. All right. There's no clarity. There's no comprehensiveness about what the company does. I guess it is concise. Excuse me. It's short, but it doesn't tell me anything. Certainly not catchy. You're already losing the audience. And the reason why catchiness is important is an investor will receive potentially hundreds of pitch decks. Okay. A medium-sized fund will get hundreds of pitch decks a month. Okay. And if it's not catchy, it's not going to stand out. You're going to get potentially less than 3 minutes of the average view time of your deck. So that's why it gets to be really important. Contrast this with this, and ignore the visuals here because that's not what we're focused on right now. We're just talking about the messaging. The weak title slide versus a strong title slide. Nike, footwear that maximizes performance and style for the world's best runners. Okay. There's a difference between your tagline and a description. You can use your tagline for marketing and branding purposes to customers. But when you're pitching to an investor, taglines are usually worthless. In fact, they are negative help. They hurt you because it starts introducing confusion. My fourth startup, my tagline was knowledge, value, and reliability. That would be a horrible thing to put on the title slide for an investor pitch deck because it says zero about what the company does and answers none of the key questions. So 1971, Blue Ribbon Sports was rebranded as Nike, and this subtitle here starts to tell what the company does. What you want to address is what you want to have, especially with your pitch deck in general, is you want to minimize MTTU, mean time to understanding. If the investor is only spending 3 minutes in general on the entire deck, 3 to 4 minutes on the entire deck, your mean time to understanding is a critical factor to be able to optimize. Okay. So this is why it seems like we're over rotating on a minor point, but it all adds up. All these little things will affect how much time and attention the investor spends. So if the messaging was Nike, footwear that maximizes performance and style for the world's best runners, well, what does that tell me? It tells me what the product is and the industry. So I know it's a shoe company, a footwear company of some sort. Okay. I also know the unique value proposition, maximize performance and style. It's not a low end type of brand. The product's not going to be cheesy. It's not a low end, high volume, low price, whatever. There's something special about this. And we are going to be selling initially to the world's best runners. That suggests a certain go to market, just like Tesla did when Tesla first built its first electric car. If you remember Tesla's first car, it was the little Roadster, the little two-seater that was built on a Lotus platform. It's a high-end sports car, a little over $100,000. And the initial market were, if two-seater high-end sports cars, it's going to be for the rich, okay, for people who are have a certain income level, etc., high net worth customers. So it suggested a certain approach to go to market to establish themselves. And of course, Tesla eventually released the Model S, the Model 3, the Model Y, all the other cars. And now, instead of selling into a niche market, that point of selling to the beginning of the world's best runners, it allows the investor to see, okay, I can see how this might start growing. And all these things, all these thoughts start to formulate in an investor's mind. Okay. So let's look at this a little bit more from an investor's perspective. The wording on the title slide, again, I'm ignoring visuals because we're not focused on how pretty the slide is right now in this presentation. This title slide starts to speak to investor founder fit because the investor can understand, can start to get perspectives on, is this company in my wheelhouse? Is this company something that I can support? Do I believe in this type of product positioning, world's maximized performance style for the world's best runners? Have I have I been in a market where I've supported a similar ideal customer profile? Okay, the similar persona. If the investors are not aligned, they'll likely lose focus. But when you have the investors' interest where they start to think, they will quickly focus on, I want to look at a little bit more detail about how this de-risks the opportunity. And these are all things that, again, you might think are kind of subtle, but having seen 500 plus pitch decks, this is actually more important than you realize. Okay? Especially in a large pitch event where there might be 10, 15, or 20 companies all pitching. This gives you a very strong first impression versus being lost in the sauce. Okay. So the other problem, de-risking. Okay. Most companies don't do a good job of demonstrating how they've de-risked the startup. The question you need to ask yourself is, do you understand the risk to an investor? Have you mitigated those risks by using plausible claims that are defensible? All right. We'll get into that a little bit more. This is an example of really ineffective and incorrect de-risking. So let's look at a sample claim here on total addressable market. It's very, very common. The total addressable market or market size is a very common thing that most investor pitch decks include a template. And it's usually most founders will do a Google search on, hey, I'm selling into the footwear space. How big is the footwear space? And Google will find somebody who tells you it's a $40 billion total addressable market. And then the claim is, if we just get 1% of that $40 billion total addressable market, we'll be a $400 million company. Okay. Well, the challenge is, how are you demonstrating traction and momentum? You aren't really showing a bottoms up market size. So what happens here is it's not credible and it's not believable. Just to say, if you get 1% of a big number, then we'll be a wildly successful company because this claim uses a top-down approach. The top-down approach is what's the market, and I'm going to assume I get 1% of that. There's no modeling and there's no bottoms up. Winning 1% sounds easy to an amateur, but it's actually very, very hard. This is making the mistake I call this is making the BIS mistake. BIS, BISS, because I said so. I'm going to get 1% of the market because I said I will. That never works. And in fact, if you make a BIS claim, it signals to the investor, I don't believe you, and you are not good at selling. Okay. It actually works against you. Your credibility in the investor's eyes goes down. There's also no proof. Claiming a big market is easy. Is it real? Is the analyst correct? When you do the 1% of a big number, this immediately hurts you in many, many ways. A better way to be able to demonstrate how you've de-risked, for example, the market size, is to be able to connect with a growing market with tangible traction. You could potentially demonstrate for market sizing industry revenue numbers, and don't just say it's $40 billion or whatever. Show me a trend line, especially if it's the CAGR, your accumulated aggregate growth rate. Okay. If you can show a healthy growing market, investors who are seasoned can say, okay, it's usually a good thing if your market is growing. For example, everybody's doing AI. There's probably no surprise that the AI market is growing. And it's probably no surprise why many investors have shifted their profile to include AI companies as their target investments. You can also look at your own company revenue. Okay, this is not so much market size, but we're blending in other concepts here. It's really about the de-risking. Notice here we have quarterly revenue of the company for the last 5 quarters. Okay, I want to be able to emphasize that how the important this is. I have a blog on my website that's tell your investor story with numbers. Okay. And what that means is that investors aren't experts in everything. Okay. But what they need to look at to what many investors look at to minimize the risk is what is the trend line and can you show me improvement over time? Investors invest in lines, not dots. If you tell me you've booked $1 million in revenue, that's one data point on a graph. That's a dot. Okay. But if you tell me I've got 100 million in revenue or 10 million in revenue, that's great. That's marginally helpful, but I care more to say year one we had 1 million, year two we had 2 million, year three we had 3 million, year four we had 4 million. That adds up to 10 million total. I can plot that on a graph and show the line going up and to the right. So make sure that when you're demonstrating how you de-risk the company, this is an example of using data to tell your investor story using lines and not dots. Okay. Also, the historical progress that you've made so far, maybe you don't have any revenue. That's okay. But what progress have you made in terms of your sales pipeline? What progress have you made? If your product is not ready to sell, what progress have you made in terms of your validation? Those are all data-centric ways to be able to demonstrate your traction and progress. And we've got lots of different techniques that we implement, and we work with founders on how to be able to tell a data-centric story with some sort of trend line. Okay. So what these graphs do is it gives tangible traction of a growing, tangible evidence of a growing market. There's bottoms up data from the financial model or from your revenue. The historical data of your past history, it supports the future looking quarterly projections. And early proof shows your ability to execute. Okay. These are all things that an investor will look for that oftentimes are lost and not captured in most startup pitches. They don't effectively demonstrate a de-risked growth engine, and therefore, even if the company's product looks interesting, many investors will still say, "This is too early for me," because they don't see how you've demonstrated any traction. So this is pretty important. Okay. So when you look at the investor's view, I talked about it already. Make sure you tell your story with numbers and avoid BIS because I said so. Right. Hey, I'm you'd be surprised how many people make the BIS mistake. It'd be as if I, at age 57, said, I'm going to start working out and I'm going to make it to the NBA and dunk on LeBron James. I can make that claim, but you probably look at me. You're short, you're fat, and you're slow. Okay. I don't believe you. All right. So but many founders make the same mistake as just making these claims because I said so. With data, I can look at the industry size and growth. I can look at the company trends, and I can look at um, uh, a data-driven approach, and it informs me about the potential risk. I don't want to just invest in something because the founder says something's going to happen. By showing a historical growing trend line, you build the investor's confidence that the company is growing and on the right track. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about investor outreach, which is really sending the right deck to the right person at the right time. Okay. We encourage people don't send a raw deck. Okay. You only have a certain number of bullets to fire, so to speak. And by sharing a deck with amateur mistakes, you burn bullets, you waste bullets. Our advice is number one, learn what works. Make sure you focus on learning, understanding how to tell a great story about how you've de-risked your company that resonates with an investor. So we have a number of classes that we have built, and our storytelling, pitch deck de-risking, and investor mindset classes have over 200 individual insights. In fact, when we we'll talk about this later. We have a pitch deck scorecard, which has 21 evaluation factors. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Number one, learn what works. Number two, get some expert feedback. Self-learning by doing Google searches, watching YouTube videos, attending the webinars such as this. That's great. That's fantastic. You learn concepts that are informational, but adding expert coaching is transformational because coaching is what usually allows you to identify blind spots and maximizes your potential. I can't swim, but I can watch an Olympic swimmer on TV and say, "Well, that doesn't look too hard." I get in the pool and I flop around, but I'm probably doing something inefficiently. If I don't have a coach to tell me what I'm doing wrong, my progress in becoming a better swimmer is going to be very poor. All right. Because this is such a hard problem, the fundraising is such a hard problem, we really want to encourage people. Make sure you learn the best practices and concepts and learn how to apply those concepts through coaching. Then find aligned investors. Make sure that you're reaching out to targeted investors who align with your industry, the type of business you have, and how the stage of your company, how early or late you are. All right. You'll end up wasting a lot of time if you try to pitch an investor who is not aligned with where you're at. Okay. We do also want to remind people that every startup is unique. Okay. So the typical approach that we talked about earlier that many founders use, download a pitch deck template, fill it in with your details. We see that as a fairly easy, but unfortunately mindless fill in the blanks effort because it will sell your company short. It usually doesn't capture your unique value. We'd also say that we have seen lots of pretty decks. I mean, we help companies build pitch decks, and we try to make them pretty, but there's graphic designers who just do a better job with the beauty. The the aesthetics, the graphical visuals are nice, but that's not what gets a company funded. In fact, I've seen some graphic designers fail in one big area, being concise, because they really don't reword your content. When we help a company build a pitch deck, we oftentimes rewrite what the company has done in order to make to shrink the content to make the slides glanceable, which is a key aspect. It's a very hard thing to do, but that's a key thing that we do. Your slides need to be glanceable. The other thing I would say is most pitch deck judges also give rather generic advice, and that's kind of challenging. It's very easy to do because if you rely on a pitch event to improve your deck, that can be of some help because it gives you a practice session. But practice sessions are not building or coaching sessions. A practice run is not a building or coaching session. Many pitch deck pitch events, you have around 5 minutes to pitch to a panel of judges. But having been a judge dozens of times, what does the judge do? Well, they have to multitask. They listen, then they consider what you're saying and the claims that you're making, while they still have to listen to the next claim that you're going to make. They also have to evaluate fundability while listening to what you're saying again, and then compile feedback to deliver. It's a very hard thing to do. In fact, serving as a pitch judge and doing a good job at it, I think is one of the hardest things that I do in the startup space because the feedback usually ends up being spontaneous, random, incomplete, superficial, and sadly forgotten. It's verbal feedback, which, leaks away often. You can only capture high level content. The spontaneous, you have 5 minutes to pitch. The judges, the three, four, five judges will share 1 minute a piece, so 5 minutes among them to give feedback. And it's spontaneous. They don't always have a methodology, a rigorous checklist. You go get your car inspected, and a good dealer will say, "We have a 53-point inspection check," whatever. They have a process. Okay. It's not easy to follow the process, 53-point inspection of your car in 5 minutes. It takes more time. So that usually results in incomplete, superficial, high-level feedback that's easily forgotten and rarely transformational and implemented. So without meaningful guidance, you get marginal feedback, and you'll probably continue the hamster wheel, the cycle of fundraising frustration, just like most other founders. Remember, the average founder does not consider fundability. They only consider fundraising. That's backwards. We always talk about focus on fundability first while fundraise before you fundraise. And that's also included in our 21-point pitch deck scorecard. Okay, your overall fundability. Most founders don't understand the investor mindset and thereby fail to tell a clear, concise, comprehensive, catchy, and compelling story about your de-risk startup. That's a combination of errors that usually results in not getting a check. Okay. If you look at all the things that founders do, if you were a vendor, how much time did you spend on your startup? What is a reasonable billing rate? If you had to charge your own company for the time that you spend, what would be a reasonable billing rate? Okay. Drop. Drop it in the chat window if you want. Okay. $30 an hour, $50 an hour, $100 an hour. Okay. Whatever. So if you just assume $50 an hour, which is a really low rate, and assume that most founders work more than a 40-hour week, say 60, 65 hours a week. If it's 65 hours a week, $50 an hour, your time is worth $3,250 a week. Okay. But the reality is, most founders, because you have some experience and you have some skills, as a vendor, you would never charge as little as $50 an hour. It's probably going to be well over $100 an hour. Okay. So if it's $100 an hour, then your time at 65 hours a week, $6,500 a week. Okay. But it's easy to understand that the average cost of your time is substantive and material. Okay. You don't want to get into the situation of this guy earlier where he spent 10,000 hours but just couldn't raise funds. Remember, you're losing time, you're burning cash, and you might be on a road to failure. Okay. So again, if you look at the $3,250 a week times 52 weeks, that's almost $200,000, okay, a year. That's a good amount of cost and cash and opportunity lost, okay? What if you had actually impactful pitch feedback, expert guidance, and relevant investor connections, okay? You could avoid wasting time, burning resources, and risking failure. So what we want to be able to do is we've taken a lot of our experience as reviewing hundreds and hundreds of pitches, working as an active investor and helping companies recently in a tough funding environment raise eight figures of funds. Okay. We've taken that and tried to package it into a solution for founders, and this is what it is. It's basically our pitch feedback package. And we'll talk about how it works, but our package is focused on delivering detailed pitch feedback in a non-rushed environment, okay? Um, Giving you access to expert fundraising coaching and a some guidance on investor outreach. It can be done in 2 to 4 weeks. Let's say it's on average 3 weeks. And how it works is this. So the process to get detailed feedback, expert guidance, and outreach advice. First, the this package starts with the founder sending us a copy of your pitch deck with a video recording of you delivering the pitch. So maximum 12 slides, 10 minutes pitch duration. We'll review it and send you a written scorecard with a recorded evaluation back to you on the things that need to be worked on or improved on that pitch. You'll revise your presentation and then send us the revised pitch, the pitch deck with an updated video recording of you delivering the revised deck. Then we'll give you a second round of feedback, after which written feedback using the scorecard with a recorded walk through the scorecard. Then we wrap up with a live one-on-one meeting, a 30-minute call for us to be able to talk live about the insights in the deck and a proposal for how to potentially build out a funding strategy, a funding raising strategy. Okay. So we have this is a package that we have. We normally offer it for $950. We're really launching it effectively today. So we are offering a discount, a 50% discount for the first two webinar attendees. Okay. So that basically in 21 days, you'll gain the pitch deck feedback, expert fundraising advice, and investor outreach guidance. And our goal is to help you stop risking your time, money, and success of your venture, like most other founders. So, um, Zach looks like he's just pasted into the chat window two links, and I apologize for the complexity here. The way our website platform works, there's really just two ways to be able to get that 50% discount. So click one of those links. Hopefully, if you're interested, you'll be able to get one of them. Even if you're not able to get one of them, we also have a discount, which we'll talk about in a moment. Okay. So some of the feedback that we've gotten, we appreciate Grace Rodriguez. She's a CEO and of a basically an accelerator based in Houston, and her comment was used to work with a VC fund and co-founded two incubators with accelerator programs. And her feedback is we've done a great job making fundraising understandable for early stage founders. This was feedback from one of our founders that we worked with a while back as an advisor to our companies, Sam, myself, my technical depth, business breadth, and clear methodical approach has proven firsthand expertise at startup execution. His only regret was the fact that we didn't work together sooner. Okay. And that company did have an exit back in 2020. Okay. So our goal is to help founders get past the 99% failure rate and to help deliver expertise with our repeatable process and our methodology to help you address and solve your pitch deck needs. Our pitch deck scorecard, as I mentioned, is a 21 point inspection. We will evaluate 21 different factors and give you written, detailed feedback in a non-rush format. Then we'll iterate on that. We'll do that twice as part of this package, and then also give you a live session to be able to talk through the feedback and potential plans to help you really get on the right track. Okay. So I'll wrap it up here. I've been going, and we have 10 minutes for Q&A. Zach, if maybe you can kind of talk through. It looks like Zach, you've got some comments about the status of the biggest discounts.
Yeah, so the coupons are gone for the biggest discounts. We do have access to still another big discount for everyone on this call. We didn't get a lot of questions in the chat, which shows that we did a pretty good job showing information in the slides, which is nice. But if anyone wants to talk through the service or have any kind of questions that they have right now about fundraising and creating a pitch deck, feel free to drop your question in the chat and we'll go through them one time. And it's a one-time cost, by the way, to Clinton. I'll put that in the chat so everyone can read that.
Yeah,
One-time payment.
it's a one-time cost because it's effectively a one-time service where you go through this cycle. These 5 steps, you go through them linearly. You don't go and iterate again unless you wanted to buy a second round of a second cycle.
Yep. So I'll put the link again. Everyone here has access to this huge discount, over $300 off this offer because it's our first time launching it. I'll put that back in the chat as well. Rakesh says as part of the service, do you connect founders to relevant potential investors?
Yeah.
So
So we get that question very, very frequently. And the answer is no. And you may feel like, why not? I'm paying for it. Okay. We do not guarantee any connections with investors. I have an investor network, it's about 200 people, but I do not yet know, as a result of a startup founder going through this process, how fundable you will be at the end of this process. Okay.
yep.
It's a factor
No.
of how many gaps that you have. And a simple little 3-week project is not going to close every gap if you have many of them. All right. The other factor here is I do introductions for fundable companies. And because I do not know where you're at and where you're starting from and how much progress you make, um, it just doesn't make sense for anyone, not just me, anyone who says, I guarantee a certain number of investor introductions without knowing anything about you and your company. That's a false sense of hope. They are preying on founder hopium. Okay. And, that's a very unreasonable and, in my view, unethical way to sell, to promise a certain number of introductions without any knowledge. Would I promise you an introduction to my daughter as a date without knowing who you are? No. Okay. And no one else here would do that either. All right. Until I know, oh, you're a good guy, you have a job, you're not, sociopath or all these other things. All right. And anyone who makes that type of promise is giving you a false sense of hope.
So a couple questions. I'm going to go with Jenny's first. Jenny asked me in a DM, Do investors care more about organic growth versus paid growth from advertising? How does an investor evaluate where your growth comes from?
Okay. So that's a fairly nuanced question, and it's a little risky to kind of give a blanket answer. But what I would say is investors, of course, care about growth, but they do want to know how you generated that growth. Um, so it is very possible to juice your growth by, you know, tripling your advertising budget just before you reach out to investors. All right. And when you go through due diligence with a good investor, they will ask about your revenue and your pipeline and your marketing processes. So rather than saying organic versus inorganic, et cetera, investors care about what works and what it costs to make it work. Okay. So if advertising is super effective, and you have a very high multiple on your return on ad spend, sure, I'm fine with it if you spend a lot of money on marketing. If you can demonstrate a lot of money on advertising, if you can demonstrate that you have consistent and scalable ROAS, return on ad spend. So generally, the best growth is organic. However, it is very reasonable to have a marketing system and an engine that is inorganic. Okay. You can have paid, earned media, all these other different things. What the investor cares about most is growth. And if you're have inorganic growth, if you're paying for advertising or you're going through all sorts of growth generation type things, then you have to demonstrate a strong ROI and strong metrics on that growth engine.
Okay, excellent. And by the way, shout out to Charles Mobbs and Nader Fatin on getting the two biggest discounts. So a quick shout out to them. Let's
Okay.
go into a couple other questions here. I mean, here's a general one. It's gonna be tough to answer in the last few minutes, but Mayank says, can you tell a few things that are good for a competitive slide?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a big
So,
topic.
sure, absolutely. Because the competitive slide is one of the 21 points that we have when we deliver the process. So on a competitive slide, there's two ways to be able to do it. All right. Number one is most people do a 2 by 2 matrix where it shows you define two axes like uh, complexity and cost might be the two axes. So I'm simple and low and affordable. That puts me in the upper right. Everybody else is complex and expensive. That puts them in the lower left. That's a simple way to be able to do it. It's very visual. Some people like that. In in other cases, some investors look at that and just like they dismiss that. I personally like the visual, but other investors might have a different preference. The second way to do a competitive slide is to do a table of benefits or advantages comparison. And I specifically say a table of benefits or advantages and not features. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, sorry for getting into the weeds here. Okay, in your product management, a good product manager should understand there are three things to be able to consider: features, advantages, and benefits. Features are low-level aspects of your product that appeal to the frontline users. An advantage is what these features aggregate to give you a differentiator. The benefit is the impact to the customer. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say I make reusable shopping bags, reusable grocery bags. The feature is it's double stitched. The advantage is that it's stronger. The benefit is I can hold more weight without it breaking. Okay. In your competitive slide, compare advantages or benefits, not features, because features tend to be super long, okay, and you'll get lost. Advantages and benefits can be more up-leveled to a mid-level or an executive level manager type of perspective, okay? Build a table with um, you and the competitors across the horizontal, across the top, and the advantages or benefits as rows. Don't do yourself and competitors as the vertical axis. do as a horizontal because that's how most comparison tables are built. Some people do it backwards, and it forces the investor to kind of what? Okay, they kind of have to turn their head to think 90-degree angle. Okay, so either the two by two matrix or the advantages comparison table. Okay, most common way to be able to do the competitive slide. Okay.
Awesome. So people are saying thanks. Young's happy now, so that's great. Let me go into one. I know we have some about the film industry, but I feel like there's questions that are going to apply more broadly to all the startup founders. And I know there's been a lot of comments in that film industry thread, so that person's being helped. Um,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
have V saying, how can a pitch deck balance storytelling with data to emotionally engage investors while proving a scalable business case? Amanda had some nice general feedback, which is on point. I wonder
Mhm.
what your thoughts are on getting that balance right as an investor.
Uh, I would say it's very, very hard. Okay. Um, Maybe rather than just generic comments, uh, we have a one of our clients a while back did a pitch event, and he had a specific pitch deck style. Maybe what I can do is while we work on another question, let me see if I can find the YouTube video for that particular pitch,
Yeah.
and I'll paste it into the chat window. If people can stay on for 1 minute, we'll go to another question, and I'll see if I can find that and paste it into the chat window. The reason I think that's important because number one, that particular pitch was clean, light, and it really checked all the boxes of clear, concise, catchy, comprehensive, and compelling. This particular founder did an excellent job at selling because that was his background, and he was also very, very coachable. And this was one of the companies that just raised this year. Okay, they closed a seven-figure round. All right. Um, but to be clear, I've been working with this company for almost just under 2 years. Okay. So these are not get rich quick or get funded quick types of things because get funded quick, get rich quick just doesn't work.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
while you do that, say I'll pull up. So there's an easy question. Steven says, should you have two pitch decks or read ahead with lots of detail and a simpler presentation deck? By that, he means a spoken deck. You definitely should have that. Some founders even have three, which is like a one pager pretty much, and then the reading deck, and then a deck that's ready to be spoken with a talk track.
Mhm.
So, and again, our service helps you come up with the best feedback for your first deck. Then you'll know from there what to do in your second deck based on our feedback for you. And everyone who's here now, we are going to send the recording out. I think I've said that probably like 100 times in the chat. I'll verbally say we're going to send the recording out. We're going to send the slides out. Don't worry about that.
Okay, I found the link for the the effective pitch.
Yeah. And then to Viet. So Viet, we had only two codes for half off. It's a huge discount. And those have already been taken. But there is the link I just sent. It's for $5.99, which again is a huge $300+ discount off our normal price for this. And if you go to the link that I'll put in this chat again, you can access that discount for everyone in this webinar.
Yeah. So the
There you
the
go.
link I just pasted for the founder doing the good pitch. It's like 11 minutes or something. Pay attention to the judge's feedback. Okay. I think it'd be very, very telling. So, a lot of what that particular founder did aligns very, very well with our system for building an effective pitch. And again, that founder just raised. Took a while, but that founder just closed a seven-figure round.
Excellent. Well, we'll do this webinar again. I loved how everyone was engaged throughout. Must have done a pretty good job with how the slides are set up. And yeah, once again, if you want to get access to our service at a discount, the two big discount codes are gone, but this last link will give you $300+ off our service as a thank you for coming to our launch event.
Yeah, I think that last link is a 5.99 price point. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to be able to help. We really enjoy working with startup founders. We believe that a systematic approach will help most founders maximize the chance of success. We encourage founders to focus on your fundability first before you fundraise. You'll be much, much more successful. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
If this was helpful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also check out our other videos for more startup content.